Hi guys, today as a continuation of the neural coordination, we shall talk about the ventricles of brain and the cerebrospinal fluid. So if you take the brain, it's a hollow structure inside having ventricles. See, what are the ventricles? Where are they present? How they communicate with each other, and what is the function of the ventricles. These are all the things we are going to see now. See, it's a hollow structure. If you take section of the brain, you can see two lateral ventricles present in the cerebral hemispheres. So you must know the name of the ventricle and where are they present and where they communicate, how they communicate with each other. So two lateral ventricles present in the cerebral hemispheres. It is the forebrain, is the cerebrum part, cerebral hemispheres. And then you can see a third ventricle in the portion of diencephalon, that's also in the forebrain. So third ventricle is in the diencephalon. These two lateral ventricles communicate with the third ventricle present in the diencephalon through a hole called foramen of Monro. Foramen of Monro. So you must know. So these lateral ventricles are the largest ventricles, or the four ventricles. The largest ventricles are the lateral ventricles. So the two lateral ventricles present in the cerebral hemispheres contact to the third ventricle, which is present in the diencephalon through the whole foramen of Monro. Then next ventricle is the fourth ventricle that is present in the medulla oblongata. So third ventricle communicates with the fourth ventricle by a hole called cerebral aqueduct. Cerebral aqueduct. And then finally the fourth ventricle in the medulla oblongata opens into the central canal of the spinal cord. So this is the ventricles. I repeat for your convenience, two lateral ventricles, the largest ventricles, are present in the cerebral hemispheres. Then third ventricle is present in the diencephalon. These two lateral ventricles communicate with the third ventricle through the whole foramen of Monro. And then the fourth ventricle is in the medulla oblongata. Third and fourth ventricles are communicated by the whole cerebral aqueduct. Okay. And then finally the fourth ventricle in the medulla oblongata opens into the central canal of the spinal cord. The main function of the fourth ventricle, it protects brain from trauma. When brain is affected, an accident or anything, that helps, the fourth ventricle helps to protect the brain from the trauma. Then totally, why should be the ventricles present here? Why should there be ventricles inside the brain? See, ventricles are critically important for normal functioning of the CNS. Central nervous system is actually protected and it is normally functioning with the help of these ventricles. It actually protects the brain by allowing it to float, give buoyancy to the float. The ventricles contain the cerebrospinal fluid, CSF, so it helps buoyancy to the brain. And it helps as the shock absorber for the brain. This is the importance of ventricles. Next we are coming to the cerebral spinal fluid. The cerebral spinal fluid is present surrounding the brain and the spinal cord. Actually in the brain, between this arachnoid membrane and the pia mater, there will be a space, arachnoid space, in which the CSF is present and it is continued in the central canal of the spinal cord. Now, where does it originate? we must know, further this diagram is important. I have given the parts of the diencephalon. So diencephalon is the part wherein the CSF is secreted. The roof of the diencephalon is called the choroid plexus. It is the, you can see the anterior choroid plexus. This is the posterior choroid plexus. This is the diencephalon. See other parts, can see optic chiasma and then infundibulum, mammalian bodies, the endocrine gland, hypophysis, etc. So the roof of the diencephalon is called the choroid plexus. Anterior choroid plexus and posterior choroid plexus. This choroid plexus secretes CSF. Right. What is choroid plexus? So for this diagram is important. You can see the choroid plexus. It is the anterior choroid plexus and the posterior choroid plexus present in the diencephalon, the roof of the diencephalon. Right. The choroid plexus produce the CSF into the ventricles of the brain. What are the choroid plexus, or what is choroid plexus? It is they are made up of modified cells called ependymal cells, EPENDYMAL, ependymal cells. They are specialized epithelial cells that line the ventricular system of the brain. Actually, this is a modified specialized epithelial cells called ependymal cells that line the ventricular system of the brain. Now coming to CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. What is the nature of spinal fluid? It is, the name indicates, it is it's a liquid, colorless, clear fluid. So actually the choroid plexus secretes the cerebrospinal fluid, and where it is drained, finally the CSF is absorbed in the arachnoid granulation. So absorbed in the arachnoid granulation. So choroid CSF is a clear colorless fluid secreted by the choroid plexus, and finally it is absorbed in the arachnoid membrane, arachnoid granulation, arachnoid space. Then take the nature of the CSF, it is lymph-like. It is, with the absence of RBC, other things are present as lymph-like, liquid-like, and then it is alkaline nature. You know the pH scale from 1 to 14. So 1 to 6.9 acidic, 7 neutral, 7.1 to 14 basic. This is 7.2 to 7.4 in pH. That is slightly basic, alkaline in nature. In adult, 120 ml is present in our body. Suppose if excessive CSF is there, suppose it is not drained properly, what will happen? That will cause the ventricle to swell. So excess of CSF will cause the ventricle to swell. And then, what are the functions of the CSF? Very important. Number one, it is protective in nature. It gives protection to the brain and spinal cord. Number two, nutrition. It gives food, provides nutrition as it flows inside the ventricles of the brain and the spinal cord. It supplies the food to the brain and the spinal cord. Number three, it acts as a shock absorber. During emergency, it acts as a shock absorber, and it actually protects the brain and spinal cord. And then it reduces friction between the brain cells and the spinal cord cells. Actually, it reduces the friction. And then maintains the cranial pressure. So inside the cranium there will be pressure by which the brain and spinal cord is protected. That cranial pressure is maintained by the flow of cerebral spinal fluid. And then it also supplies oxygen to the brain. Cerebrospinal fluid supplies oxygen to the brain, very important. Without oxygen, brain cells will die. It supplies oxygen to the brain. And then it protects brain from desiccation. It doesn't allow to dry. It protects from desiccation and offer buoyancy. I already told you it offers a buoyancy. It gives actually the brain is made to float, and then removes the waste products from cerebral metabolism. It actually helps to remove the waste products of the cerebral metabolism. So these are all about the ventricles of the brain and CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. So actually per day 500 ml of cerebrospinal fluid is secreted in our body. So it is also another important area, the ventricles of the brain, the two lateral ventricles, third ventricle and fourth ventricle, and between foramen Monro and cerebral aqueduct, etc. And then the CSF, where it is produced from anterior choroid plexus of the diencephalon. And then what is the nature of CSF and the functions of CSF. So in this chapter we have clarified everything regarding the ventricles of the brain and the cerebrospinal fluid. Thank you very much.